I'm very glad that we have an exciting session coming up right now. But before we move on to the introduction of our next speaker, I'd like to ask you if you've had a chance to download the free trial of iSpring Suite. If not, then you still have just a minute or two to do so. And please don't miss out on this opportunity. And I would like to ask everyone, just as a sort of a small icebreaker before the very next and the very last part of our session today, about the experience that you have had already. Please share in the chat one word in which you would be able to describe the sessions that you have already experienced previously. I don't know, it could be the word exciting, or it could be challenging, or it could be unexpectedly. Any word could be an adjective, an adverb, a noun, anything you like. You know, could even be a filler word. Anyway, I'm looking forward to getting your answers, and I see some of them are already there, starting from fantastic and excellent to insightful and inspirational. And I'm honestly very, very glad to hear that, because these are exactly the words that we were keeping in mind with our iSpring team before we were planning this session for you. So great, informative, expert. I'm very glad to see those words, educational as well. All right, fantastic. I'm very glad. I still have the answers coming, but I think it's just the right time for us to proceed to the next speaker. We'll have the next exciting session with Clark on creating an effective scenario from scratch. Clark Aldrich will share his expertise on designing immersive scenarios that engage learners and drive meaningful learning outcomes, which I think is extremely important, and we should never forget about those meaningful outcomes. And of course, you can discover the power of storytelling and how it can be leveraged to create authentic learning experiences. So please gain insights on best practices, tips and techniques for designing scenarios that truly resonate to your audience. I can see Clark is already here with us. And if he hears us very well, loud and clear, then I yield the floor to Clark. And I'm absolutely sure that this is going to be a fantastic communication with our very engaged audience. Clark, the floor is yours.
Chris, thank you so very much. I'm so thrilled to be here, and hopefully I can add to the day's momentum and excitement. This is a short sim workshop. In this thing, I'm going to show you how to create your own short sim. Short sim is a kind of interactive scenario that's been optimized around efficiency, optimized around delivering as much content in as small a way as possible. It's a 40-hour process. This will take you 40 hours to build one 8 or 10-minute short sim in real life. So it's a reasonable amount of time. For pre-work, as you're thinking about this stuff, it really is useful to play some short sims yourself. So obviously right now is not the best time to click off it and play it, but you should play some short sims before you do any authoring yourself, and get an authoring tool. Obviously, iSpring TalkMaster is the tool that I use most of all, and I'll be using iSpring's TalkMaster in these examples here. So short sims, in my opinion, is the pedagogy for the next generation. It's an alternative to traditional workbooks and traditional lectures for delivering content. And I'm going to say they're even really necessary for evolving education past where we are today. So it's a really big opportunity. Short sims are transforming and transformative experiential learning, but it's also there for the real world. So we have all the learning to do skills. We can teach leadership through short sims. We can teach certification skills and innovation because they are aligned with how we really learn. They're focused on how do we really learn in the real world. But they're also for a real world infrastructure. These are affordable to build. Your organization can build short sims. Again, about 40 hours with one person, non-technical, can create a finished short sim. They're editable. We can all go in there. We don't need super technical skills to edit them. They operate on the infrastructure that already exists in most organizations. There's open standards here. There's nothing proprietary about any of this stuff. So we can build the content and do it. And it's also understandable. It's understandable to learners, to instructors, and to stakeholders. So these are all the reasons why we're seeing now more and more organizations adopting short sims for these reasons and transforming their learning organization. One last bit of background. Way back in 2004, I did some research on what kinds of simulations were organizations really using. And I came up with 4 kinds. Again, this is published from Learning by Doing, my book in 2004. Interactive spreadsheets, virtual labs and virtual products, branching stories, and game-based models. Those are the four kinds of SIMs that organizations were really using and effectively back in 2004. And to some degree, short SIMs are the combination of all four of these. There's the systems thinking of interactive spreadsheets, there's the kinestheticness of products, there's the ease of branching stories, and then some of the visual interactivity of game-based models. So it's sort of a combination of all four of those. So here's the process for creating your own short SIMs. And again, I'm giving you 40 hours to do this, and I'm going to tell you how I'm going to allocate your time. As with everything, your mileage may vary. But the first thing you got to do is pick a topic. Pick a topic for your short SIM, whatever you want people to focus in on your short SIM. Once you've done that, again, about half an hour, you then need to interview a subject matter expert on the topic, which again is about a 1 hour interview. One subject matter expert on one topic for 1 hour gives you enough content for a 8 or 10 minute short SIM. So that's all you need to do is interview one subject matter expert for 1 hour. And then sit and listen and review the recordings. I'm very stingy with my time, but it's well worth it to spend a lot of time. I put 3 hours to listening to the subject matter expert speak and writing down what he or she says and capturing it in note form. You're going to ask in the interview with the subject matter expert, you're going to ask two questions. One question is, what is the right way of doing this? So let's say it is a kind of leadership, let's say delegated leadership. What is the right way of delegating leadership in various situations? But the other question you're going to ask the subject matter expert, which I actually find more interesting, is what are common mistakes made when in the real world people practice, again, let's say delegated leadership or certification or anything. When people do this stuff in the real world, what are the common mistakes they make? So those are going to be our building blocks. So at the end of listening to the recording of the subject matter expert, you're going to have a pile of notes, and a pile of notes are going to be in these two forms. What's the right way of doing things, and what are the common mistakes? So for the right way of doing things, I also ask really nitty-gritty questions. How long does it take? Do you have examples of that document? What do people feel doing it? So let's say you're doing a sim on innovating. What do people feel when they're in the innovation process? What do they feel like when they're failing? What do they feel like when, they're presenting new customers with their new stuff and people don't understand it, for example? So we really get into the nitty-gritty of the right way of doing things. But again, the more interesting question is, what are the common mistakes? So for example, in a hostile robbery situation, if we're going to train people how to manage hostile robbery situations well, one common mistake is people don't look around the parking lot before they open the bank in the morning. So that, it's 6 o'clock in the morning, they go open the bank and they don't look around and there's someone waiting for them. It's called a morning glory robbery and they rob them. So that's a common mistake in hostile robberies. For deliberate practice, there's a whole discipline of deliberate practice. How do we, how do the best people get to become the best people? Well, one common mistake in deliberate practice is most people focus on where they're strong, not where they're weak. And if you're focusing on deliberate practice, you really need to focus in on where you're weak, for example. Virtual work, a common mistake for managers when they're managing teams virtually is more, is they think that more meetings means more productivity. And in fact, often the opposite's there. The more meetings you have, the less productivity you have. And in short sim design, I'll throw myself in the list here. Most of the bad short sims are too wordy. People want to throw in too many words, and we really do have to narrow down words. So these are examples of common mistakes. Common mistakes are the most important thing that you're going to be building your sim around. What's nice about them is almost, if you include all these common mistakes, your sim has value. Your organization will, you will solve some of the common problems by deploying the sim well. So most important element is to gather all of these common mistakes. So then as you have these pile of right ways and common mistakes, you want to start basically putting them in chronological order. So again, let's say you're doing it on avoiding robberies or how to deal with robberies. Well, we're going to start doing like early morning stuff and then midday stuff and then afternoon stuff. We're going to start putting things in orders. If you're doing one on delegated leadership, for example, then maybe we have a new employee. How do we deal with that new employee? Now we have a more experienced employee. Now we have a more advanced employee. So we start putting all these pile of note cards, basically virtual, hopefully, into a chronological order from beginning to end. Once we've done that, once we have this big pile in kind of chronological order, we look at our sim in general and we start identifying the setting for it. Now, sometimes that's really easy. Sometimes identifying, if you're dealing with customer service or something, well, the setting is going to be customer service, talking to a customer. But here's one that I had to do on the demand curve, on getting people comfortable for an academic one, actually for the Gates Foundation, on the demand curve. And it's actually quite a challenge to say, what is a good context to learn the demand curve? What's a way of presenting the demand curve in a way? So I chose a drink truck, or actually a food truck that sells drinks, where you have a line of people, you can change the price and you can change the demand. So creating the right setting for a sim. For the one on deliberate practice, the discipline of deliberate practice, my setting here was saying sports is a very easy one. If you're a soccer player and you're really, really good at kicking the ball hard, but you're not so good at, say, avoiding the other team, maybe, you should spend a lot more time focusing on avoiding the other team. But I wanted to create one a little more soft skills focus. So in my deliberate practice sim, I decided coming up with someone who loved debating and wanted to become a great debater. And so that became a nice context for it. So the setting is a really, really important part of this part of the process, coming up with a setting that ties all this stuff together. Then the next thing you want to start doing, again, we'll give you 1 hour for identifying the setting. It's a fun hour, by the way. It's an hour walking around outside, scratching, looking up at the sky and the birds and driving around maybe. So that's a really fun hour, kind of coming up with the right setting for the situation. What's the thing that makes the content self-evident as much as possible? Then you start identifying the levels and the story beats. So I typically break the content now into 3 levels. So, what is level 1 of the, and it's somewhat arbitrary, again, if it's like 3 customers in a customer service situation, it might be customer 1, customer 2, customer 3. If it's a negotiating simulation, it might be level 1 is gathering the information and understanding the other person's side. Maybe level 2 is the first conversation where you're brainstorming with the person. And then maybe level 3 is sort of coming to some conclusions. How you break the sim up into, say, 3 levels is kind of up to you, but you want to keep things manageable. And this keeps the sort of the pile of content fairly organized. By the way, if this is your first sim, I'd probably only do a 2-level sim. So don't go crazy on your first sim, but 2-level. But ultimately, you do want to, your finished sims for real world clients are probably going to be around 3 levels. At this point, you should almost be able to write up a sheet of paper that has a 3-level framework. What's the topic of your sim? What's the setting of your sim going to be? I like challenging myself and my students when I'm doing workshops to be able to say with every single short sim, fill in this statement. You are a blank and you have to do blank. You are a new manager and you have to deal with a rowdy new employee. Or you are, you're an inventor and you're trying to bring a new product to market or whatever. So putting it that simple, the second or third sentence in any good simulation should be, you are a blank and you have to do blank. It has to be that simple. It can't be more complicated than that. So then for each level, you can think through what's a brief description of that level. What does success look like at the end of that level? Everyone's happy around the table. That's a good success. Or people are fed or whatever. What does success look like at the end of each level? What are the common problems? What are the 3 or 4 common problems that we're going to present in each of these levels? What are the right ways of doing things? And then any questions that you have for yourself. This is not, this is not for the sim. This is for me as a designer saying, I really don't know how this works. I really need to figure this out. So we should be able to create at this point in the sim process, this basic scratch sheet, which gives us the really foundation that we're going to build upon for a simulation. This is also something that we can give to clients. And we can tell clients, okay, take a look at this and tell me where I got it wrong. Because again, I'm always very specific. I'd much rather be specific and wrong than vague and right. So I'll give people very specific stuff and they go, hey, Clark, you got it completely wrong. And that's sort of the right time to have this conversation. So with that as sort of one chunk of content and one deliverable, in this case to the client, which is always good, this worksheet, what are some questions that you have at this point, if any? Chris?
Great. Let's check out what questions our attendees have in the chat. This is exactly the right time for you guys to ask the first portion of questions, because I believe Clark wants to structure the session so that we've got questions now and then so that we don't accumulate them till the end, because I'm sure the other slides are also very, very rich in terms of content. So if you have any questions, for the time being.
No worries if you don't, and or we'll have other times to do that. So again, if at this point you're saying, ooh, I don't like this, I hate this makes sense, it doesn't, tell me now. or you can tell me a bit later.
Yeah, well, we've got different comments so far. Somebody says that they love this format. There is Susan who says that sounds too easy. Lots of love. So it's yeah, I think it's
I promise you it'll get harder.
Yeah,
but I also promise you that part one of the sim design is being as narrow as you can. So the first half of the sim design is not killing yourself, is being as focused as you possibly. Most people screw up by getting way too complicated, way too early. Don't start off simple. Here's a simple activity. You are, you are a manager and you have a troubled employee who's not turning in his or her assignment, and you have to deal with the trouble. Make it that super duper narrow specific, because the more narrow you are in the first time, the better off you are.
Sure.
May I continue?
Yeah, we've got some other questions coming, and I kindly ask my technical team colleagues to support me in the technical questions as well. And I'd like to just extend the comment about the slides, that every slide will be sent over to you. All the slides will be sent over to you within a week, together with the video recording of these presentations. So we've got 3 questions. Let's begin with the one from Katie. What if you're trying to explain a complex sales offer, for example? Then do you do many small sims?
Yeah, so a sim's about 8 minutes long, and you can, if you should never make one short sim. You should just just keep making a string of short sims, and break it up into small bits if you can. And one short sim might be about the total sales process from beginning to end, talking about your product abstractly, and a second sim may be getting into the real nitty-gritty of various specifications. And so, one short sim, again, a big sprawling narrative of here's what it's like to sell this product, and here's the kind of high-level pushbacks people have where people get comfortable. And again, sim number 2 is now we're going to zoom into say the configuration of this or the technology behind it or whatever, and then do sort of a second simulation that's all about the nitty-gritty. But again, keep any sim to about 8 or 9 minutes. It goes down more smoothly. It keeps you sane in creating it, and it keeps the learner sane from going through it.
Great, Clark. And the other question was, which you basically have already taken, how long is the short sim? So you've answered that question.
About 8 or 9 minutes.
Yeah. Good. And then there is one more question here.
Excellent.
We are just starting to incorporate sims into our training. Do you recommend training with sims exclusively, asks Jennifer, or do you recommend sims in addition to more traditionally presented content? Sounds like a very well thought of question.
Very well. Most organizations go through this process. Most organizations start off with adding a few short sims about 2/3 through any course module as a bit of a knowledge check and a bit of a, let's see if you're paying attention and here's something a little fun. But then, and again, I have plenty of clients with whom I've been working for 5 or 6 years. Every year, the clients shift the percentage of content to short sims higher and higher and higher, and they move the short sims earlier and earlier and earlier in the course. I have plenty of clients who are now what they call sim first, which is saying, let's start off with a bunch of simulations at the beginning to give high-level perspectives on this topic, and then we'll have a bit of workbook stuff in the middle, but then end with sims as well in terms of experiencing this stuff. So I think I've seen some clients do sim only, which is great, and I certainly encourage those a lot. But I think mostly you see a lot of hybrids with, again, a greater and greater percentage. Right now, I see plenty of courses that are 80% short sims and 20% workbook content for multi-hour certification style courses. So we can really go really, it's amazing how deep you can go on short sims if you want to. Good. Okay. So next thing you're going to do is create a storyboard with placeholder branches and graphics. So here's see if this works. Okay, good. So here's what it's like in iSpring. You go in, you get new scene, again, some kind of generic welcome thing. Use the message tool here to create the title of your sim. And then again, it's an incredibly easy process. And again, I'm giving you some nothing content just to show you what it looks like, but you just click and drag. In this case, I'm going to do now level 1. I'm going to type level 1 for myself. The end student's not going to see level 1, but I just, to keep myself organized. Again, here's a bit of a setup, and you can create your first decision, and then you're going to have a wrong answer, and then you're going to have a right answer. Sort of, that's simple. With the right answer, again, you keep going. If you get it right, then hey, great job. Well, nicely done. And here's why you got it right. With the wrong answer, I like to go off to the side and say, well, here's what happened when you got it wrong. And then, okay, let me go back and make another choice. So wrong answers are very non-punitive, and let's just make that one red, just so we can see so we can see it at a glance. I think we can do with every decision or some decisions is something like, before I answer, can you tell me more about the situation? So this is a great place for linear content. Hey, tell me more about the rules of sexual harassment, or tell me more about, the lawyer's case against me, or tell me more about how this property works. So you can always add in a lot of content into a short sim with sort of you don't have to go through the content, but you get it if you want to. So what this looks like right here, there's no characters or anything. It just says welcome. This is a sim about level 1, set up, right? Give me more information, wrong answer, go back, right answer. So it's just a really nice little simple thing, very easy to put together of what a basic interaction looks like when you do it on iSpring. So at this point, we kind of have a storyboard that we can play through. And this is very, what a friend called caveman English. This is very much, cold day, walk inside, see an ice cream cone, or whatever. So incredibly blunt sort of writing at this point. We don't want to get fancy here, but now we're starting to see our structure. Now we're putting it into iSpring Talkmaster. It's going to look like this. We have our levels that are nice and organized. We have little feedback cycles for all, for every word there's a common mistake, we're going to present it. So here's an example. Welcome to the robbery simulation. So welcome, okay, welcome to blank, blank, blank. You're a bank employee and you have to make the best of robbery situations. Okay, so this is just a rough draft. Level 1 is the morning glory. You arrive at the bank parking lot to open up the bank in the early morning. What do? Park right away or survey the parking lot? Common mistake is park right away and walk right in. The right answer is survey the parking lot. So if you click on park right away, then the bad guy's waiting for you. So at this point in the simulation process, that's all you need to do. You don't need to make it fancy. You don't need to do graphics quite yet. You just need to block it all out. Then what you can do, again, using iSpring, is go in and maybe put in a coach character just for fun. So now you can start putting in a character. Go in and put in a background. So just click on the graphic, go to the background and give yourself a background. I happen to use a lot of custom stuff because I'm nuts. But it's, so you do that. And then most importantly is get rid of the little emotion meter, because that's really distracting. Sorry. So, go in and click off the emotion meter. So there, so, now you have a, basic character. Again, it takes all of a few seconds to get your basic character. What it looks like without the character is this. What it looks like with the character is this. And then you can also go in and start playing with some emotions, again, going into edit scene and say, make a happy character. So much better. Again, iSpring is incredibly fun, by the way, to make your own custom characters. It's a really, really great tool for creating custom characters. So basic things there. So that's how we then create a storyboard. You should be able to click through your entire storyboard at this point. So start at the beginning, click, click, click. It's all rough. It's all ugly. It doesn't matter. You can now see the entire sim. I guarantee you, once you have this whole thing done that you can click through, you're going to breathe easy. Everyone freaks out until they have this clickable storyboard. So this is almost a race to the storyboard as fast as you possibly can. Get yourself a working storyboard, and then you can go back and have some coffee and chill out. But just really as fast as you possibly can, create a storyboard and quick. Any questions come in at this point? Well, we can keep going if not.
Yes, there are, Clark. Thank
Excellent.
you so much. There are a couple of questions, so let's get started with some of those. We have another question. Could this be designed as a choose your own adventure story?
You want to be really careful with some of the early branching stories failed in two regards. Early branching stories failed when they became way too wordy. People hate reading text on screen, and there's nothing that kills a short sim faster than wordiness. Part 2 is sprawling narratives, and especially parallel narratives. A lot of us in the early days thought having stories that sort of branched off and you follow different branches and then you end the sim on a customized ending depending on the branch you took. We thought that was a good idea. It turns out to be a really, really awful idea. It's absolutely miserable to create them, and learners hate them. Because if you're a good learner, you got to go through and play every story because you're a good learner and you're studious. And if you're not, then you still feel like you've cheated or you left out content or something. So that initial concept of parallel narratives that sprawl out based on critical decisions is a sure path to an absolute failed short sim that is miserable to create and miserable to play and not very effective at learning objectives. So no. So branching interface, good. Sprawling, too wordy and parallel narratives ends up being a really phenomenally, those of us who did it really regret the sims that we did that way.
Okay, Clark. And there is one more comment rather than a question, but I think you might want to really dwell upon that. Storyboarding is the hardest part, and design and cleanup is the fun part.
Yes, I totally agree. So once you have this storyboard, so it's a race to the storyboard. Once you've had that, now you can, now we still have a bunch of hard work to do, but this process for doing it is a fairly easy, rigorous way of doing it. So now we're going to move on to some of the more philosophical stuff here. So now again, I'm trying to make you as narrow as you possibly can, to be as tight as you possibly can, to focus as much as you can. Now you start looking at your sim as a whole. Now that you have an ugly branching framework in front of you, you almost want to use, I guess, what I call soft eyes. How do you sort of look at the whole thing as a whole? One thing I look for is something called a consistent interface. When you play the sims that I've created, most of the sims have a consistent interface. In other words, you're making a lot of the same decisions, but because things are different, there's different right or wrong answers. So one thing you're going to look at across your entire sim is there any consistency between the kinds of questions that you're asking the player? And then the other challenge is, how often can you present the exact same options to the player, even though in some cases you might have to simplify and abstract. Don't worry, I'll give you examples of this. But so again, this is all part of the de-intellectualization process of a good short sim. We don't want people to read. We don't want people to think too hard. We want them to act. We want them to act intuitively. We want them to act. So for example, we could have a long process. Here's a process that you're reviewing an application. And every step of the way, we can say, do you see a problem? Yes or no? And if it's yes, then we might ask, well, what problem do you see? And if it's no, you move on to the next one. In a healthcare sim, we could have 25 different situations of a healthcare worker during the course of a day. And after every single step, say, do you wash your hands now? Yes or no? You arrive at, you park your car and walk to the parking garage. Do you wash your hands? Yes or no? You walk into a patient's room. Do you wash your hands? Yes or no? You leave the patient's room. Do you wash your hands? Yes or no? And so again, in this case, we could always ask the exact same question. Again, I just did one with working with elderly clients in a banking situation. And every single time, every single story beat of the simulation, do you agree to what the client says? Do you ask for more information, or do you escalate this to your boss because it seems suspicious? And so, we have 5 or 10 beats during the course of the simulation. Every single time we're asking those same questions. Likewise, a sales call, you can break an entire sales call interface into every single step of the way. Do you build trust or do you spend trust? So it's a really fun thing to try to figure out, is there a consistent, especially non-intellectual, simple interface decision that you can make repeatedly throughout the entire simulation. By the way, that's what makes computer games so much fun, is the joystick, you press the joystick forward, it always goes up, you press it back, you always go down. So, I did this, again, there's a sim here on delegating authority. And so I asked, given an employee situation, and given that you have to ask the employee to do something, do you micromanage? Do you delegate the process, or do you delegate the authority? So we can keep asking that same set of questions. It's different every time. It's the same questions, not the same answer, because things are different as this person evolves. And then you can also get more information. So this notion of it. So for one on ransomware, for example, every single ransomware situation said, hey, you just got an email, or you're on a chat room or whatever. Are you suspicious or not? You get an email from a colleague and sending you a SharePoint link to a document. You regularly work with this colleague. How would you approach the situation, suspiciously or not suspiciously? So we have, this sim starts off with 10 situations, or is 10 situations. Each time, this is the first of, suspiciously or not. If you choose suspiciously, then we'll go a little deeper and say, well, why are you suspicious? And if you're not suspicious, then again, we move on unless something bad happened because of it. So it's amazing how often, again, in the drink one, we're always making the same decision. The goal in this demand curve sim at some point is to create a situation where demand equals exactly 7. So in order to create a situation where demand equals exactly 7, do you raise the price, do you lower the price, or do you wait for the sun to come out, or if you toggle that, you wait for the sun to go back behind the clouds? And again, we have a little cheat sheet here to show you where you are in the demand curve to get you there. Always the same. So it's a fun thing to do. Every time you click raise the price, you lose a few people. Every time you click lower the price, you gain a few people. It's fun to see. It's very interactive and very responsive. And again, it's using this consistent interface. Same thing here. There's one on decision making or planning, where you are allocating resources towards a big goal of yours, and you can move through this fan to figure out which goal do you want to accomplish and how much time will that take, and then kind of get yourself to the right place to identify what you think of to be a really exciting goal for yourself. Again, every single time it's that same basic interface that gets us there. So consistent interface gets us to a really interesting spot where we start looking at our sim a little more philosophically. The other side of consistent interface is what I call theory of the case. What is the theory of the case? What is the one thing you want people to practice in your sim and remember after they left your sim? What are other variables, systems, or processes that people should be thinking about and considering in the context of their situation? I really hold back on presenting my theory of the case to my players. In a perfect world, the players almost come up with their own theory of the case. So I want them to discover it and invent it and take ownership for it. And only at the very end of the sim, reluctantly, do I say, hey, congratulations, you have done this, you have learned this, you have demonstrated this. So I give people credit for the coming up with the theory of the case by the end of the sim, if there is one. So let me give you some examples. In virtual work, if you're a manager of virtual work, you might have three variables that you're working with. You have exposure to the organization, like meetings, how much back and forth you have with your organization. You have productivity, second variable, and then you have work-life balance. And at any single time, the manager can push two at the expense of the third. So if you want your employee to really get a lot of work done, you don't give them any exposure to the organization. You don't have many staff meetings. You don't have many calls. You allow them to get work done, and then they can be productive and have a work-life balance. They can actually enjoy their life. But then if you increase exposure to the organization, you actually have to kill one or the other. Likewise, if you have a big emergency, you might increase exposure to the organization in terms of lots of Zoom calls, lots of chat rooms. Productivity has to go through the roof, but during that time, the person's work-life balance is going to tank. So again, one of the theories of the case of virtual work. Deliberate practice, you don't grow when you're in a flow state. You have to target where you're weak very specifically. Delegating authority, again, every employee goes on a journey. And you have to start off micromanaging them and then delegating process and then delegating authority. You have to take them along that journey. And if you do not take them along that journey, they will end up hating you. They will end up resenting you and often become very suboptimal. So part of that, again, is so now we have to create, for the delegating authority example, we might have to create a graph. And we say for every step of this sim, the person, we can look at the person's skill level, high, low. We can look at their interest level in the job, high, low. And so again, micromanaging is if these things are pretty low, delegating process is if these things are in the middle, and delegating authority is if these things are to the right. So it gives you, so we start kind of coming up with this giant theory of the case. And again, I like to make it implicit and only give the player the chance to create their own. Okay. Now what you need to do is start, filling in some of the holes. You've now done sort of the big intellectualism of the sim, and now you just got to kind of got to do some grunt work here. Sorry about that, but you do. Now you can start creating your introductions. Now you can start creating your transitions from say day to day. Level 2 might be day number 2, and level 3 might be day number 3. Create some introductions to that. And then we can also start at this point mapping out some of our successes. So at the end of every level, we might have some successes. Okay. So here's a sim introduction. Welcome to sim designed for practicing leadership. In this sim, you're a manager. You have a team of analysts who write influential research articles on public policy. Your goal is to get your team to produce high quality reports. Let's see how well you do. So very simple, nothing scary here. Like, okay, great, I'm a manager. Okay, nothing complicated. Okay, I'm in. I understand, I understand the premise of this thing. Different sim, different graphics, but maybe halfway through, you have to go, meet with the client. Okay, this meeting is for his annual portfolio review. You pick up the client folder and head to the meeting. So we're about to introduce this next part of the sim. We might have an establishing shot, as they say in the sitcom business. We might have a, here you are back in your office kind of thing. So at the end, then the end of every level, other than the end of the sim itself, you might have things like, hey, good job, you've completed the process. You understand that. So again, I'm giving people credit for this. I'm not saying I'm going to tell you this or I'm teaching you this or don't forget. I'm saying, hey, you understand, you've shown this in the meeting. Here's what you did. And then you've learned that follow-up is critical. So again, we use a bit of summing up at the end of every level and a little bit of summing up at the end of the sim itself, giving people credit for what they did as opposed to, lecturing at them or finger wagging or something. And then this part in the process, we start filling in some of the feedback for the wrong decisions. So here's a decision in the dealing with a problem employee. You decide to wait for Lucas to grow out of it, but he never does. In fact, his behavior gets worse and worse, ending up with some significant public embarrassment for your department. So again, nice, simple, here's what happened. It's not saying you broke rule number 7. It's saying, here's the consequences of my behavior. I'm going to go back and choose again. You can be a little more elaborate in your, and again, I like showing people why problems are, why mistakes are mistakes. So in this case, let's go to the sim. You're managing a team of managers, and it's Monday at 8 o'clock at night. You're finally home after a day of traveling. You've received an email from the CEO about a new push for work-life balance, saying how important it is. Great. You want to support the organizational goal and you have some ideas. Which do you do? Do you send out an email and get it off your plate, or do you make a note to yourself to do it tomorrow morning? Again, 8 p.m. at night, work-life balance. But still, if you do click the wrong answer, send out the email now and get it off your plate. Some of us would do that. You send out your email on work-life balance at 8:10. So here's all your here's your employees. They send it out to their employees now at 8:40, and now pretty soon, everyone is getting this email, late into the evening about how important work-life balance is, totally undermining what you're saying. So again, you can, okay, well, that wasn't good. Let me choose again. And you do the right answer, and then you sort of see a happy organization. So again, very effortless, very easy to play, but you start seeing how the consequences of your behaviors play out. That's feedback. Okay. Now in the process, after we've added the feedback for wrong decisions, we start working the interface. So now we start going through, and again, this is where we do our final implementation of any theory of the case. Let's use this. If you're using the same language, great. In this case, micromanage, and by the time we get near the end of the sim, it's not just delegate authority, but now delegate authority with some control over staffing, delegate authority with control over budget, staffing, timing. So we're slightly expanding this thing, but every time you're sort of making this decision. So use repetition, the same options with very different right answers. And also just continually de-intellectualize. I like to use, blunt terms, and say, I can say push back on this or disagree, or, use rough terms. Don't be super intellectual. Don't be super wordy, and just allow, in this case, allowing people to practice this of looking at a situation and deciding, which approach is right. Okay, so look for broad theory of the case, fill in the sim, add feedback for wrong decisions, and work the interface. This is our second to last question section, so I think we're doing well. Any questions at this point?
Right. I think we don't have many questions, but we do have a couple of comments, so I'll go through those.
Great.
And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask right now. This is just the right time. So Tass is saying that she likes the immediate sense of gratification when answering questions. So yeah, I think it's just
a really important point. Again, a sort of an earlier philosophy of Sims was let's have people play for a long time in their negative scenario. Worst case scenario, which you make a little mistake and then you make another mistake and pretty soon you're just in a giant hole. The philosophy of short sims is, 1 or 2 or worst case 3, but usually it's just one cell showing what happened. Here's the consequence of your behavior. And now let's go back and make, make that decision again. So really fast feedback, really clear, really non-judgmental. Well, sometimes we have the coach making an eye roll or something, but, just really fast and friendly. And again, the coach as much as possible says, here's what's happened, rather than no, you're wrong, let me tell you why, but sometimes you need to do that as well. So really fast feedback, fast negative, get people back on track as soon as possible. Easier for you as a programmer, easier for the player to learn.
Right. There is, I think the other comments were more technical, so I'll skip it right here. But if you wouldn't mind, may I ask a personal question on my side?
Please.
Yeah, thank you, because I also got quite engaged, and I was wondering that in the majority of cases which you were showcasing, pardon my tautology, you had just a couple of options, the 2 options to choose from. Is that quite normal if you have more options, or that changes the whole logic and undermines the idea?
So the more options you have, the more intellectual the process becomes. So suddenly you're no longer in the moment, you're now studying for a test. Mm-hmm. So I hate, every once in a while I'll do 4, usually, I love binary options. I love A or B. Do you take the blue pill or the red pill? Do you storm out of the meeting, or do you try to reconcile? It's, those of us who develop tests for a living or assessment strategies like the 3 or 4, and let's make it hard. No, not at all. 3 questions, 3 answers, fast, short. binary if possible. Let's get to the absolute nub of the problem. The thing we can do that is, I care a lot about exhausting learners, and I don't want to at all. I want to keep them happy. I want to make my learners feel like they're zipping right along. So I can give them like 5 or 6 binary questions, one in a row. And they'll rip right through it and they'll feel great about it. But you give them like 2 with like 4 and they're like, oh, they're sitting in there. And so I'm a huge fan of binary options. Oftentimes I can't do that. I'm huge again, in a perfect sim, it might be 3 options, and maybe there's still hey, do you want more information before you go on? In some sim, I did a sim on introducing the whole new topic. Again, it's the first time a person went to training and say, here's a bunch of new employee in a technical capacity. The sim said, here's the situation. What do you do? By the way, you can press this button and I'll give you the right answer.
Right.
So, you in the sim, you can look it up. So do you want to have fun and try to guess and try to see how clever you are? Or do you want to read the instruction manual? There's you're not being scored. It's not like we're going to penalize you. So do what you want. And most people like to guess and see how smart they are. They get it right. If they get it wrong, they're happy to have learned something. If they get it right, they feel smug and we didn't lecture them on what they already knew. And so you can create an entire sim, going down that process of sort of saying, I know you don't know this topic at all. You've never done this activity before, but you're smart. Let's see how well you can guess your way through it with the knowledge that there's always the right answer that will give you, or you can look up the right answer if you really hate making mistakes.
Right. Great. So Clark, at this point, we have about 16 minutes left until the end of the session. So I'd suggest that we proceed, and we do have a couple of more questions, but let's say we'll leave them to the final time.
We're doing well here. Huge topic. It's like a 5-hour workshop that's condensed to 1 hour. So thank you, and I appreciate your indulgence. So now we're going to start adding graphics and props. Again, it's about 5 hours. So it's a pretty big chunk of your time. I typically have a bunch of different styles that I use. I sort of use a more pen and ink style for soft skills. I use more of an isometric if it's a more physically located things. I use sort of a vector graphic if it's hard process. I'll use a lot of props and things if it's sort of a certification style skill. And sort of abstract props for a more conceptual topic. So this is where you start doing the thing. What I do is I create all of my graphics in PowerPoint because I'm an idiot. But it works really, really, really well. Use the PowerPoint slide screen to map out everything. I also use vectors a lot, and so rather than sort of traditional clip art, I use vector clip art and vectors myself. This gives me a lot of flexibility in terms of changing things. A really big theme for all of the stuff that I'm going to talk to you about graphics is how do you keep things flexible? How do you keep things as absolutely fluidly as possible? Then save as a JPEG. So save as, go down to JPEG. Save. You can also use a PNG, but I always use JPEGs. Save as a JPEG. There you go. In this case, just one. So I'll do one slide at a time. Then you go to TalkMaster. We'll go over to TalkMaster. And where you want it inserted, TalkMaster is so easy to do this. It's just such a pleasure to use TalkMaster and do this stuff. Go to it. Go to image. Go to background, and add it to it. Find the right folder, and then just toss it in. So again, I can do this in about 5 seconds. It's just like second nature to me. And now, while I get rid of the character in this case. And there, you now have a graphic. You can do any graphic you want. No one can tell you what graphic to do. You can do any graphic you want, and do it that way. So now you start using graphics for scaffolding. So where am I in the process? So that's nice. Using dials and things. So the other thing we do is I create a lot of props, and so in this case I'm turning out to be a very good forger. I think I've lost my one thing about one career path for me could have been forging documents, but PowerPoint is such a powerful tool. In this case, I create entire documents from in PowerPoint that mock it. Once again, the really important thing is how fast can I do it? Because again, you write something, you create a graphic and you throw it into your sim, and then the client comes back and says, "Oh no, we don't want it from Idaho, we want it from Maryland or something." And then you can go in here. Here's a government badge. This entire government badge is made using off-the-shelf art from again in PowerPoint and using some stuff I found online. So it's incredibly easy to go through, and in this case I made up a whole government agency, FRA. It doesn't really exist, but you can just take the stuff. You can use signature fonts. So once again, it's just this notion of speed, this notion of when clients have a problem, I mean, clients call up and say, hey, Clark, we really don't want, we don't want it to be a male, we want it to be female, or we really, let's make this person be Dutch or something. You can just go in and change it instantly. Here's a big philosophical thought that's worth it to internalize, which is most of us are really, really good at writing. We write a paragraph, we write 2 paragraphs, we write a page, and we find a problem, we go back and we change it. We have to get that good with visuals. We have to get as good with visuals. So again, the client said, hey, can we make this Massachusetts? Great. So I'm going to change this to Massachusetts. Again, this is all just stuff I found on the internet and tacked together to create a document. But we have to get as good with visuals as we are with words. We have to go and we have to do that little process, export as JPEG, import into TalkMaster, make a little change and wince a little bit and go back and change again stuff. So we just have to get incredibly fluid at this process of dynamics. Another thing we need to do, which is one reason I do use PowerPoint specifically, is we have to think like an animator. I mean, we think of slide builds. So here's one slide, and here's the next slide. So again, virtual work. So you do something here, you increase the exposure, you increase the productivity, but you decrease the balance. And so again, I create both of these slides separately from each other. Really easy to do. Copy it and move it a little bit. And then import them one after another sequentially. And so again, if you do option 1, you do this. If you do option 2, you might get you get a different thing. So we can use our ability to quickly create graphics to flush out all these branching scenarios and give sort of very customized feedback to if you have a long meeting, what happens? If you have a short meeting, what happens? The thing you start doing, if you play some of the sims on my site, is you start seeing a logical interaction. So here again, here's where I keep all the documents for this, in this case, passport application. I'm going to zoom in. So now I'm zooming in. It's all created in PowerPoint. I zoom in. Let's zoom in a little more. Okay, great. So now I'm going to switch focuses. I'm going to focus on the picture. Okay, that's nice. Now we're going to zoom in on the consular report of birth abroad, and then zoom in. So we can create situations where people are very fluidly moving between documents, zooming in, zooming out without even thinking about it. No one's ever had problems in terms of navigating this. It's all multiple choice. It's all easy. But zoom out, zoom in, switch documents, whatever. And so we allow people to fully explore all of these documents, in real time. And so then we just add them to the we add them to the sim. In this case, send up the first applicant. Great. Okay. So she had a big file called passports. They go to the Middle East for 2 months. That's nice. And here's here's the picture. And do you accept it or not? Well, don't, because the Middle East doesn't like bare shoulders. But so this, you just start adding graphics and it just becomes part of the product. So at this point in the sim, you getting a little more complicated. This is an abstract of what your iSpring TalkMaster should look like. You're going to have your introduction, level 1, level 2, a bunch of little mistakes and feedbacks, all of these opportunities to make common mistakes along the way. So now we're start adding a bit of scaffolding. We're almost done, but now we're really getting something good, something that we can write home about and be proud of.
And people are very amazed in the chat, Clark. They keep texting messages like, wow, I'm so amazed by your skills and then you name it, lots of different skills in visual design.
Do it. I'm clever, but I'm not talented, but I'm clever. So it's really stuff that anyone can do. So let me show you again scaffolding. So now every time we have an interaction, we're gonna scaffold up to it. So here's a good example. So welcome to the sim on leading hybrid work as a manager. In the sim, you're a manager of a hybrid team and you have a goal of managing your team productively for 3 days. Okay, well, what could be easier? There's your goal. Some of your team works full-time at your office. Okay. The rest of the team using some various work arrangements, work at home at least some of the time. And this one also works fully remotely, many time zones away. So our one new employee works from home some of the time. He's been on the job for a week and this is his first real job. He processes documents. When you work at different locations, how often do you engage him to help him be productive? Every few hours, every couple of days, once a week? Well, the right answer is every few hours. So there, that you really need to ping this new employee a lot in order to keep him from freaking out and being productive. So the point there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, 6 slides. In 6 slides, I've introduced to you my graphic framework. Okay, we're gonna have people here. You manage a team. I've introduced to you how we're gonna show people. If we're zooming in on people, we're gonna we'll show them there. And then if we're really focusing on people, we're gonna put them there. And then we're gonna make decisions that are gonna impact this chart. So through this scaffolding, it's an incredibly gentle wrap up. No one thinks about it. It's like you just play the sim and it's like, oh, of course I'm managing a team. And again, this is a branching story framework where you are managing a team of people worrying about their, these complicated processes, but it just goes down so smoothly. That's what good scaffolding does, is sort of working up to just like, how gently can you do this? Okay, here's one I showed you before. Consider a food truck that's selling drinks. You know, you can raise and lower prices. Currently, the drink is 50 cents, so we're going to raise the price again. Okay, we're going to throw in some customers there, and now, oh, look, there's a demand curve. What do? You know, and there's a demand curve. So again, in 5 beats and 5 clicks and 5 things, we've introduced to a player an entirely new visual language, entirely new visual framework that we're going to then use to show them something a bit. So that's sort of the real joy of scaffolding, is just putting up 3 or 4 slides at the beginning to get them used to the interface, get them used to the visual, get them used to seeing a couple little things move when they do something, gives them a little bit of excitement. And then, again, if you do this smoothly, you don't ever need instructions for your sim. You don't ever need to tell anyone how to do something. They just, we just slowly increase the skill cone, and they never think about it if you do it well. Here's the hostile robbery simulation. Here's the evil scaffolding. Okay, so that was my nice scaffolding. That's Clark is a nice person. Here's some evil scaffolding. So hostile robbery simulation. So as you remember, this is a situation. You arrive at the bank to open it up. What do? Park right away or survey the parking lot. So it's pretty boring, pretty obvious question. Let's be a little more evil. Let's be a little more sneaky. So it's Monday morning and you got a busy week. Colleague called in sick, so you have to help out even more. You decide to head to work early to get a few things done before things get too busy. Okay, you're a busy. You're one of us. You got tons of junk to do. For breakfast, what do you drink with breakfast? Coffee, instant coffee, orange juice, tea, or your last can of Pepsi AM. That's a private joke, by the way. But so now I don't know, coffee, great, coffee. Okay, now you drive to your bank or the credit union. What do? Do you park closest to the door? Do you park further from the door, or drive around the parking lot? And now, because of scaffolding, I've sort of taught you here that these are like the serious questions and these are the silly questions. So I've already sort of tricked you into sort of thinking that, okay, this is just a goof. We're going to have fun here. We're going to goof around a bit. Don't worry about it. But, so we've already taught you that. We've also got you clicking, where you're just sort of like, okay, these are low consequence. Okay, I'm just going to click away. So we've got used to clicking, and we've gotten used to kind of thinking the bottom ones are kind of the silly ones. So now we have this situation. You park closest to the door, you park further from the door, or drive around the parking lot. Every single security person in the world is not fooled by my silly little trick here. They're like, of course, drive in the parking lot, idiot. But most people who don't think about it and who aren't, most of them say either I'm going to park closest to the door, or I'm going to be good and park further from the door. So, and then bang, they get robbed. So again, using scaffolding, this is a sim on robbery. This is on avoiding robbery situations. And I've already gotten you to make a mistake that is a real life, real world, serious mistake. But I've suckered you into showing, to understanding this behavior. And again, in about 3 slides, like wow, oh, that was fast, because this kind of robbery is fast. It comes out of nowhere. It totally takes you, it shocks you in a sport. So again, this is how we make this situation interesting, in this case by using evil scaffolding and sort of slowly tricking people to do it. Last part of the sim is really just cutting unnecessary words. Go through, cut words, cut again. I've never seen a student sim that I couldn't take out like 2/3 of the words. Words are the enemy. You want people clicking, you want people moving, you want people breezing right along. You don't want them reading a lot of words. So again, a good short sim is done, not when there's nothing more to add, but when there's nothing more to take away. So words are the enemy, like you wouldn't believe. It just totally intellectualizes the process, which takes out the intuitiveness and the fun. Also makes it harder to review and harder to proofread. So this is the sim you now have at this point. And again, if you're a student and doing your first sim, it's going to be more like 2 levels, and then review it. So if you do all that stuff right, you have an incredibly smooth thing. The worst thing about doing sims is if you do it really, really well, everyone thinks of them as like totally natural. Oh yeah, that was just so, oh, did you actually work hard at that? That just seems like just so unbelievably smooth. So that's always a good sign for me, is when people just sort of suck these things down like drinking chocolate milk, but they learn what they need to learn. And they're sort of entertained and engaged. And obviously, most importantly, is they are exposed to the right way of doing things. They're exposed to underlying systems. They learn how to read situations, and they are inoculated against making a lot of common mistakes. So, last set of questions.
Right.
Everyone's going like, oh, my head hurts so much.
No. We do have actually a lot of comments, by the way, but I will start with the questions if you don't mind.
Please.
So we've got a question. Is there a good strategy to incorporate sims into systems training, that is technical releases and its updates? Thanks in advance.
Say one more time, please. I missed that last part.
Absolutely. Is there a good strategy to incorporate sims into systems training, that is technical releases and its updates?
Sure. I mean, the whole point is all this stuff. I mean, it's stuff is really easy to change. I mean, again, you go into PowerPoint and you throw in a new screenshot, or you throw in a new widget with a new, thing. So the reason why every single sim, I have my storyline, my story file, my scenario file from Talkmaster, and then I have a PowerPoint deck. And so I keep the PowerPoint deck in the same place that I keep my scenario files. And so it's incredibly easy to go in, use PowerPoint, and put in new screenshots, maybe put a shadow effect or whatever, and then re-upload them. It happens all the time. The passport one said, hey, we're adding a third gender. We've gone from male and female to male, female, and X gender. Every single form had to be changed in your entire sim. Great, that really was not a big deal, because it was all, it's just all simply, changing the graphics in PowerPoint, easy to do, and then exporting it, then importing it back in. So it's really surprisingly easy if you organize your sim well, like I showed you how to do, and if you organize your PowerPoints well, then changes are effortless. And by the way, a lot of simulations die because they can't be updated. And one of the most important things of a short sim is it's nothing to update a sim. New addresses, new terms, new whatever, new graphics, easy peasy to update. That's the whole point of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Or maybe you want to adjust it to a new culture or to a new country.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. Even the new language. Anyway, would you fancy another question, Clark? We do have
Please,
one.
absolutely, as many as you can handle. I'm not going anywhere, but I know you have your next sessions coming up.
Right. We have the next session coming, but there's just 1 minute left for this last question. And I think if you can answer very quickly, that would be great. Have you tried creating a simulation using only slides, only PowerPoint?
You mean not using like Talkmaster?
I guess so. I believe so.
You can, in theory. I mean, this approach is totally non-technology dependent. I mean, you can do this stuff with sheets of paper. You can do this stuff with PowerPoint.
Exactly.
You can do. I mean, this is not. No one's. I'm not here to sell you any technology. Do whatever, however you want, however it works. Do it. I'm going to say that Talkmaster is the easiest way to do it, and I'm going to say if you don't make it easy, you're not going to actually do it. I promise you, if you try to do it in PowerPoint, you'll probably give up. So learn to do it and get comfortable doing it on a great tool like Talkmaster, and then and only then do you want to veer off of that path potentially. But again, it's so much harder that it really just sucks the energy out of the process.
All right, fantastic. So thank you so very much, Clark. That was really, really helpful. And I see that there are lots of small comments in the chat that start accumulating right now with the thanks and comments about how amazing your art was here. So I really do appreciate everything that you've shared with us today. And I hope you'll stay with us for the very last speech of today.
Thank you so much. I can't wait.
Right.
And everyone,
great.
Thank you so much for joining me. I really, really do appreciate it.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Clark. All right. Then without further ado, I suggest that we proceed to the very next part of our agenda today.